So autism, and looking at it from, or the word autism, let's say, and looking at it from a motor, physical perspective, which I feel a lot of people seem to miss.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if, well, I know you kind of feel the same. And how autism tends to take people down the line of being cognitive and behavioural. And you and I both see very much a physical component in our children anyway, and maybe even sort of there's subgroups within the autism labels.
Yes.
Yeah, what do you think?
My own son, we were taken down the cognitive paradigm route because when was he diagnosed? At 3? They told me he had no receptive language and a severe cognitive delay, which I think back, how can you say that with confidence when you have no reliable method of communication? So they bring the child into the room in this stressful testing environment, and they ask them to sort colors, and when they can't do it, they assume it's because they don't understand versus they can't get their body to do it, which is just horrible when you think about it. And so they send the parents down that trajectory of, it's a complete life different trajectory. And so then the discovery that it's more the real issue, including why he can't speak, is sensory motor problem versus some kind of low intelligence or cognitive was shocking. It was so difficult to unlearn. I had to unlearn everything they told me about my son, everything I thought I knew about him. Because I think a lot of people, like as we were talking about the sort of subtypes of autism, people think that it's just one linear spectrum, and the ones with speaking autism, where they often have some difficulty with social cues and deciphering social cues, and sort of need that as part of their intervention. The ones without speech and who have more of the behavioral issues and repetitive patterns and lack of speech, they think it's the same thing. They have the same problems, but on top of that, like no intelligence or low intelligence, and it's so wrong. A group like our children who have serious sensory motor problems, which are also part of the reason why they can't speak and they can't often dress themselves or do self-care, and have even more sensory issues as the world is coming at them so intensely. And but they don't seem to, in my experience, they don't seem to have the same social differences. They are like the most astute observers of human behavior. They're quite intelligent, actually, in that respect. One of my practitioners taught me to like look through everything they do through a motor lens, a sensory motor lens. I thought that's really good. That's a really good approach. And so I try to, and when I'm teaching other people to work with my son, I tell them there's a difference between how I talk to Stellan the person and Stellan the body. So I talk to Stellan the person like any other 8-year-old, but when I'm coaching his body, because there's this like disconnect that he's trying so hard, like he's walking around in this uncontrollable body all the time. He's fighting this body to do what he wants all the time. Sometimes it does the opposite. So to kind of bring him back into this body awareness, I'll name the body part and give it an action. So if he's I'll even say, because repeating, come over here, like he knows what he wants to do, but I'll say like, bring your body over here, or head turn, or eyes to the left.
And I find sometimes just tapping.
The tactile. I often if we need to lift his leg, I'll like tap the muscle. That's what they need to, exactly. That's so effective. Yeah.
And we're talking about like giving lots of different cues to get that body to do what it...
Prompting, yeah.
Yeah, prompting.
Directional, like verbal. And sometimes the verbal is not
No.
the most, actually often, yeah. No. My son will tell me I talk too much. And he's, and that, or I give too many instructions. Like high support and high expectations, these guys are capable of so much more physically than what people can even imagine.
Yeah, and that's fascinating because they're so tricky. They find it so tricky to learn something, but once it's learned,
it takes them longer. Like the research shows that, I don't know if you call it kinematic learning or biomechanical learning. No, it takes them longer. Mm-hmm. But and the beautiful and frustrating part of autism is that they all come with a different sensory motor profile, and so a strategy for one won't work with another, and sometimes a strategy that works one day won't work the next.
Yeah, exactly.
Consistent inconsistency, but it's also a beautiful part of the, like, it's kind of, you appreciate. It's also, you know, their challenges are also part of their strengths and their the strengths that they come with too. But you really do have to have a lot of tools in your tool bag to have and you have to be okay with trial and error in the moments when you're working with them, whether that's with communication or physical.
Yeah, you have to get pretty creative
and not give up. A lot of like clinicians give up so soon on these guys. It's really tragic.
And we've all met that frustration, like knowing that they get it, they understand it, and you'd love them to do it. And I hit a wall, and it doesn't help sometimes.
Yes, of course, and it doesn't help on those motor battery tests where if the test isn't completed, the only option to tick off is refused or.
Well, yeah, you do this testing, don't you?
Yes.
And you've.
It's not good.
Seen it from perspective of being the therapist, but also you see it from the perspective of knowing in detail a child with severe, and you'd call that developmental coordination disorder.
Yes.
Yeah. So you see it from both sides, and you're having to tick off refuse, and you know that it's more about if I could facilitate this, or if we could spend a bit of time. He knows this. He could do this. And
my colleague who teaches the pediatric physiotherapy at the U of A here, she told me she had a student who said, well, if they can't communicate, how do you know if they're refusing to do it or they can't? And I was like, there you go. That's exactly the question that they need to ask. So for myself, I don't use that box at all, and I put notes. I use the notes section because both the I only know the acronyms, the MABC, the movement ABC, and the BOT2, they're not sensitive enough on this population, but we don't have any other tests. And so
there's a significant problem in testing and getting
even referring for the test. Nobody's, because they can do stairs, they can walk. They can't really. They're running.
Yeah, that's where therapy tends to stop. It's
right.
Like, well, if your child's independently walking, they're not referring on for physio typically.
And then parents don't see an issue. They think they're stuck in that cognitive paradigm, and they don't.
Yeah.
So they don't even think to ask their practitioners about. They're stuck in that just low expectations.
Yeah, I've found too. Therapists not even fully appreciating the motor aspect, and actually also kind of joining in the they don't understand, or
I'm guilty of that. My own mentor who kind of who's been working with a lot of level 3 autism kids for a long time, I was blown away by what I saw they were getting their clients to do, and then with my own son. And one thing that I've also learned I haven't been doing this that long, and also nothing that I learned in school has helped me. Nothing. And I know that,
although you had the lens of physical,
yes,
yeah, and I agree with you. It doesn't teach you how
no,
to manage.
but I'm happy that they've, at least in my school here, they have now introduced autism into the PEDS curriculum and the motor portion problem. So the physios are coming out of school thinking, realizing or knowing that yes, that there's a significant motor component to autism, which is great. And so what I do with my clients is a big part of what I do is this like motor curriculum and this body grammar basics. Because when you look at the neurodevelopmental process and like typically it does not waver. Like you have the baby and they start to hold their head up and then they sit up and then they start to kind of army crawl and 4-point crawl. Well, I'm missing the reach and 4-point crawl and then walk. And those stages, they don't deviate. But if you look at especially our kids, a lot of them, they might have got to walking early, but especially crawling, they don't spend either any time or very little time. But that cross patterning and that sensory input as you're doing the motor output has a huge impact on the brain development, on those higher functions of auditory processing and visual processing. Yep. So if that developmental process is disturbed, then speech, which is a high brain function, is you're going to have problems. And so going back to the basic body grammar of crawling and rolling and jumping, but you do it age appropriately and you make it fun. Like, and the brain is trainable, so you can you can and you should work on these motor patterns and these motor skills at any age, and they will help. Yeah. They will help regulation. They'll help confidence. They'll help physically.
So it's one thing seeing those things, and it's another thing.
This is very true.
Getting them to do the exercise.
I know. This is true. I'm talking like it's this piece of cake. No, it's not. And some, I'll go into a session and I'll have an idea of what I want to work on with them, and I'll explain it in the session. I'll give them an idea of what we're doing, what we're working on, and often you have to be adaptable and they might be having a hard day and just not getting their body to cooperate. They deal with a lot with like gut issues and sleep. Yeah, and they're uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable, and those things affect them profoundly, way more than they would you and I. And so then, yes, you don't always. The session often does not go as I expect, but you can always have a successful session with if the practitioner is adjusts the goals appropriately and then you find success and you tell them, and you have to really point out and appreciate the successes because they are. And it would be like you and I learning gymnastics. Difficult, this is how hard they're working. This is how hard they're working.
What were the surprising side effects of that? So it's not just about, now you know now you crawl better or you roll on the floor better, but actually all doing those things is actually translating into what did you question. See?
So for one thing, I saw him moving differently. Okay. I would see him randomly do bear crawls on the floor and practicing the stuff we were learning. I think he was realizing what his body could do and using it in different ways. And he can tell me now when he's movement deprived. He says he needs it to feel good, which anybody would. It's movement is part of our. That's we know that's like the one thing we can, for certain we can control to help our health and well-being and our length of life.
So true.
And it has helped his. So he uses text-based communication. He points to letters on a letterboard, and it has helped him with his strength and coordination. It's a long process.
So he does that more accurately? Quicker? So
he was able to sit, even sitting still or to hold your body in the position to to use the letterboard, that's a motor skill in itself. And that relaxation is a big part of the therapy too.
Okay.
Just getting them to learn how to calm their body.
Yeah.
And a lot of these kids, I think, are not touched, or like they get reduced. They don't get the normal amount of touch than other kids. And I know that they're sensitive to it, but there's ways that you can do it effectively so that it's helpful. And kids, they need touch, and they need that to feel safe and comforted. And yeah,
I've always had this feeling that Sophie didn't know that her body existed, and that is such a frightening kind of place. So I can see also where anxiety can manifest through not really knowing.
Oh, I've heard they walk around with anxiety 24/7.
Yeah. And that's one reason I felt like she was always on the move, and it wasn't like an ADHD or a hyperactive.
No,
she would want to move, and I just got this sense that it was giving her the information that she was there. It's been fascinating to kind of watch that. Coming into her body, and that growing in awareness of movements is so funny. She's always liked music, but I could see that she didn't know how to dance. Like, she didn't know how to do a move to music.
Yeah.
And I tell you, we've done some intensives as well, and she does these moves now, and she knows how to that's
amazing. That's creative body expression.
And it's become creative, and spontaneous.
We take that for granted. That's important for people. Like, people need that. We are hardwired to want to do that and to need that. So,
but it's been a long process.
Yeah,
it's like,
it is. Yeah,
and something I noticed early on in her life that was missing. She also didn't stretch. I never saw her stretch, and then one day she kind of just did a morning stretch, and it was like, oh.